So picking back up where we left off with John Locke, he's going to highly, highly, highly influence Thomas Jefferson when he is writing the Declaration of Independence. Okay, and so to skip over to Thomas Jefferson, he's going to be the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and he's heavily influenced by Locke along with others. He's a supporter of church and state, of separation of the church and state, and he is a former slave owner from Virginia, and he will be a president at one point in the United States. All right, so the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so these you can see right there with the things that are highlighted, how the influence of Locke shows in the Declaration of Independence. Now, like I said, the United States is going to need, or the colonists are going to need, a lot of help when it comes to fighting this war against Britain, okay? And in the 18th century, England and France are going to really, really, really still not like each other. Remember, a flashback to the French and Indian War, okay? And they're going to have this huge rivalry that is still going to be kind of, taking place all over the globe. And the colonial army is not going to have very many victories in the beginning. And when the ones that they do have are very, very small. So it says, while the colonial army scored many victories in the early war with England, victory is small from certain. And that's because, the United States does not, or the colonists do not have a professional army at this time. So we have militia, we have untrained men fighting the greatest army in the world, and what little victories we're getting are not really huge victories. And so this is going to be a problem because, everyone else in the world understands that the colonists are rebelling against the largest army in the world, the most well-trained army in the world. And when we go and ask them for help, they're going to kind of be like, well, I don't know. And part of that is because they know with coming to our team and helping us in the fight that they are going to be fighting against the British, and they are going to be trying to, defeat the British. And if the British defeat the colonists and them, they're going to have further issues with the British, right? They're just not going to go away and forget that, oh yeah, you helped the colonists try to rebel, right? Because the colonies are very important for Britain because they're making them a lot of money when talking about the triangular trade system. So it says most Indian tribes were actually assisting the British, who supplied them with high-tech weapons and promised return of their native lands and future deals when talking about fur trade and stuff like that. So it's actually the United States and France versus Britain and the Native Americans. So kind of how funny the tables have turned when considering the differences between the French and Indian War and here. So at the time of the Declaration, Benjamin Franklin is going to be serving as a diplomat in France. So a diplomat is somebody that represents your country abroad. So Benjamin Franklin, or Benny Frank, is going to be going over to France. He's going to be asking them for help, and he's going to be looking for their support. Now, France is convinced that the French government, doesn't really need to help them, but Benjamin Franklin does what he does, and he convinces them to lend support to the American rebels against the British. France, kind of the main point of this is France is going to feel like by supporting the colonial rebellion, they could actually weaken the English military. So even if it's unsuccessful, they could, take advantage of their military being weaker, and they're looking to get revenge from their defeat in the French and Indian War. Now, who are they sending? What are they sending? They're going to send military supplies. They're going to send food. They're going to send this thing called a navy because the colonists do not have one of those. And they're going to most importantly send military expertise. And the guy that they send over here, that's their little head honcho, is going to be this guy by the name of Marquis de Lafayette. Okay, so what in your brain, what kind of gets the French fully on board with this? Well, I'm going to tell you. Well, in October of 1777, American forces are going to score a key defeat of the British at this thing called the Battle of Saratoga. And this is the turning point of the American Revolution, because when we get this victory and France gets word of it, they're going to go, okay, we got a shot. They have a chance. This is a huge victory. Let's support them. And this is when the tide starts to turn. If you're equating this to football, you could be down and then all of a sudden a big play happens And the sideline and the team and the fans, they start to go, okay, maybe we can pull this out. Maybe we can win this game. And this is kind of what's going to happen. So Marquis de Lafayette comes over. He's a 19-year-old, so he's really young. And he is going to become Washington's right-hand man. He's going to help the assistance of military training. He's going to be huge when it comes to training the Continental Army. All right, so France is going to supply money, rations, troops, weapons, ships, military expertise, and the military expertise is the guy with the picture on the right. That's Marquis de Lafayette. So Lafayette's going to serve alongside of General Washington, like I said, and he is huge when it comes to the end of the defeat of the British at the Battle of Yorktown, which we will get to in a little bit. There's statues of Lafayette. If you go to Savannah, there's Lafayette Square. Okay, he is a huge part when considering American history. Well, how can we talk about the American Revolution or really the first 30 to 40 years of this country without talking about Washington? All right, so George Washington, he is going to be a major part in the United States history. If you do not know that, you were probably living under a rock. He is going to gain military expertise in the French and Indian War as a British officer, and he's going to be chosen as commander-in-chief of the army. Washington is like a man's man. He is, athletic build. He's 6 foot plus. He is extremely strict and rigid. He rides his white horse Nelson around. I mean, he's the man. When Washington comes into town, he looks like $1 million. He rides in on his horse, and everyone just knows that he is the man. And Washington, while he's a great leader, his problem is he does not have a professional military. So that's like object number 1 on the list is, hey, look, we got to create a professional military. We got a bunch of ragtag soldiers and farmers fighting with pitchforks and all other sorts of stuff against the best army in the world. We got to get it together. And what I always describe this as, this would be like Hillgrove High School's JV team going and playing the Kansas City Chiefs or whatever Super Bowl champion you want, and us trying to win. And they do. They pull it off, and it's a miracle. And Washington deserves a lot of credit because he doesn't have a Navy. He doesn't have a formal army when he gets, when he takes the job. And that's kind of, a big thing that you need when fighting a war. And so Washington is going to organize and train, with the assistance of the French, various state militias into something called the National Army or the Continental Army. All right. Now, life as a common soldier is not great. At the urging of Washington, Congress provided for the creation of a standing military. Usually you're enlisted for 1 to 3 years, and you're not getting paid very much. Your rations are short. You don't really have supplies or food. And disease is very, very common because when you are confined in close space, you can contract disease and you become contaminated, which with COVID, I'm sure everybody can understand. Now, despite losing many battles, Washington's going to has a strong personality. As I said, he gains a lot of support of the American soldiers. Washington's going to prefer this kind of guerrilla warfare style. He's going to engage in quick, strong attacks and then quickly leave because the Continental Army cannot really afford to lose very many people. And so what he tries to do is get in, make his attack, make his point, gain the ground that he can, and then retreat so that he can save as many rations, military items, people as he possibly can, because he knows he's going to need every single bit to defeat the British. This is probably the best illustrated in an attack that actually happens on Christmas, which is usually, you have a standstill. And this is with the crossing of the Delaware, okay? And so, the crossing of the Delaware is also known as the Battle of Trenton. Washington is going to take his troops over across the river, and they're going to attack this group of, it's actually German soldiers that are fighting for the British because, I don't know if you all know this, but people pay other countries to use their soldiers, as we are kind of learning in history currently. To fight certain battles and to be a part of their army. Well, he is going to lead this attack, and it's going to be very, very successful. And when word gets out about this, it is going to spread like wildfire. And this is going to really, really boost the morale of the American forces. And now, the people are starting to say, and the individuals fighting are starting to say, we're going to win this war. And when they get that mentality and they get that edge, things are going to start to change. This is one of the famous pictures of him crossing the Delaware. All right, so the next thing I want to hit on is the winter of Valley Forge. So Washington's skill at maintaining his force under trying conditions is at best when it's shown in the winter of 1777 to 78. This is at Valley Forge, and this is a major part when considering the eventual victory of the United States in the American Revolution. So Lafayette and other foreign military leaders are going to arrive, and they're going to start training individuals. General Baron von Steuben is going to be one of those individuals that's going to come over, and he's going to train. This is very important because the army that they are training at Valley Forge is going to be the army that's eventually going to win them the war at the Battle of Yorktown. So this is very, very important, and this is really when, you know, the army gets that training where in order to be a professional army, you have to know calls, you have to know strategy, you have to know strategic moves. I mean, this is very important, and they're all going to learn this type of stuff right now, which is going to allow them to be very effective towards the end of the war. All right, and this is kind of the picture. It's very cold. It's very snowy. They don't have, you know, winter gear and all that stuff. We kind of talked about it the other day, and a lot of people are going to die. They're going to starve. But nonetheless, they are going to make it through. And when they make it through, I've been talking about the Battle of Yorktown. This is our Fast Five. I'll kind of leave it here for a second. I'm not going to spend much time on it just because I want to get through the Battle of Yorktown. So why was it, you know, colonial victory at Saratoga significant? Benjamin Franklin's role, John Locke, Thomas Paine, common sense, and what 2 points the Declaration of Independence make? Those are all very important. So the siege at Yorktown, so I kind of want to set this up. General Lord Cornwallis, he's going to be the British leader. He's the leader of the British Army, and he's going to plan to push French-American forces southward and attempt to divide the Continental Army into two. Well, while he succeeds in doing this, eventually he's going to end up with American forces near the coastal town of Yorktown in Virginia. All right? So the problem is he is trapped on a river. He's trapped on the James River, and his back's to it. And the problem is he needs reinforcements, so he's kind of sitting there waiting. Well, they're going to surround, the French and American forces are going to surround him at Yorktown, and guess who finally shows up? The French Navy. They show up, and they're going to cut off supplies from Cornwallis, and that is eventually going to make him surrender. And when he surrenders, he ends the American Revolution. This is very embarrassing for him. Cornwallis himself doesn't even come out to give his sword and to surrender. He sends somebody else out, and it's described that he's just so incredibly embarrassed, and he should be, as, you know, he just lost the war to a bunch of ragtag soldiers who just learned how to fight. Okay, and this is a good visual for it. And the red kind of shows you where the British are. Okay, they're trapped here. Here comes the French Navy right here, cutting off everything. And then there are your American French troops that are surrounding it. And then the lines as they are, kind of forcing them to be trapped there on the river. This is a picture of the surrender. Of course, there's Washington looking like $1,000,000. Of course, there's a little sun around him. He looks nice. Horse looks good. But that's going to be the surrender. And with the surrender, you're going to have something called the Treaty of Paris. Okay, 1783, not the first Treaty of Paris. So the Treaty of Paris is going to formally end the American Revolution. The United States won its independence from Great Britain and gained control of land stretching west to the Mississippi River. It says, next, the newly freed colonists would have the tumultuous, task of creating an entirely new government on their own. So you notice we are going to have access to all of this land west to the Mississippi. Okay, and we're going to end up giving Florida back. All right, and that is where we are going to stop for today, and that is the ending of the American Revolution.